שקלים, משנה א'. בשלושה פרקים בשנה תורמים את הלשכה. 3 times during the year they would withdraw, they would remove the half shkolim that were in the chamber, and they would remove them and say that these coins will be used to purchase communal korbanos. And they were placed in 3 separate baskets, bags, as will be explained in subsequent Mishnah. We've mentioned before that when they did this, when they removed the coins from the chamber, they said this was on behalf of all the coins that were there. In fact, even for the coins that were on their way, or the coins that were going to be given, so that every individual, every member of Klal Yisrael would be part of the communal korbanos. Nevertheless, they collected these coins 3 times a year, so that coins that were on the way, people were bringing the chatzi shkolim from the distance, would actually be in the chamber when they removed the coins. They wanted them to actually be there rather than just say for the coins that were on the way. And therefore there were 3 particular times during the year that they removed the coins from the lishka. What were these 3 dates? Bifrois HaPesach, Bifrois HaTzeres, Bifrois HaChag. Frois, explains the Bartanura, is part or half of the time. Which time? This Tana of the Mishnah holds the familiar rule that we know, that Shloshim Yom Kodem HaChag, 30 days before the Yomim Tovim, Shoelim V'doshim, people start discussing and explaining about the halachas of the Yom Tov. 30 days. Half of that time period, 15 days, was the time that they removed Prois HaPesach. This will be half of the time, 15 days prior to Pesach, which would therefore be the last day of Adar. Bifrois HaTzeres, 15 days prior to Shavuos, and Bifrois HaChag, 15 days prior to Sukkot, which will be the last day of Elul. Continues the Mishnah. V'hein gronos lemaisa behema divrei Rabbi Akiva. We now move on to a different topic, Maisa Behema. And Rabbi Akiva is of the opinion that these dates are the same dates for the gronos of Maisa Behema. What does that mean? Maisa Behema, which we've mentioned in one of the early Mishnayos, all the kosher animals that were born during a year were kept together. Actually, they were made to pass through a small area, and then the 10th of each, every 10, because it's Maisa Behema, every 10th, a mark, tseva, was placed on that animal, and it was then taken to Yerushalayim, part offered up, and the rest eaten by the individual, by the owner, or others too. Only one particular year, from year to year. Now what's interesting, the Gemara in Bechorah says that with Maisa Behema, strictly speaking, one could use the behemoths, eat them, sell them, prior to going through this mitzvah of selecting and choosing. Actually, it wouldn't be choosing, it would just be selecting the 10th animal. Different to Trumas HaMaasros, which would be forbidden before Trumas HaMaasros are taken. However, most people, because they would be eating this animal, taking it to Yerushalayim and eating it there, they normally would leave it for later on, so that all that they wouldn't be eating necessarily or selling the animals until they took the Maisa from it. There were 3 particular times of the year where the Chachomim said it's forbidden to eat these animals until you take your Maisa Behema. And the reason why they stipulated these 3 periods, so that people would take their Maisa Behema, they would then sell the other animals, and there would be more animals available for the Yomim Tovim. And therefore, Rabbi Akiva says that those 3 dates that we mentioned, Prois HaPesach, Prois HaTzeres, and Prois HaChog, were the same dates that people would be taking their Maisa Behema. From then on, it would be forbidden to eat animals until you've taken your Maisa Behema. And there were the Gronos La Maisa Behema, the collecting, the taking for the Maisa Behema. Ben Azai disagrees, and the Rambam explains Ben Azai disagrees with these dates for Maisa Behema. As we'll find in a moment, Rab Loz and Rab Shimon also disagree. Ben Azai disagrees with these dates and says, no, it's Be'esrim V'Tisha Ba'adar. It's the 29th of Adar, this date, the first date for taking Maisa Behema. From then on, it would be forbidden to eat, as I say, before taking Maisa Behema. The 29th of Adar, isn't that the same as Prois HaPesach, 15 days prior to Pesach? Explains the Bartanura that Ben Azai was of the opinion that Adar was always choser, it was always 29 days, and therefore he can be specific and say the 29th of Adar. Whereas the first Tana, Rabbi Akiva, was of the opinion that in the days where we were Makadish al Pi Re'iyah, only by seeing the moon, then you would be Makadish the Chodesh. In those days, it could be 29, it could be 30. And therefore, the Mishnah said, Bifrois HaPesach, 15 days prior to Pesach, the date, the last day of Adar, might have been the 29th, might have been the 30th. Whereas Ben Azai says, no, whatever happens, Adar is always choser, it's always 29 days. The second date, Ben Azai also disagrees with. B'Sivan, rather than 15 days prior to Shavuos, it's B'Sivan, Be'echot B'Sivan, the first of Sivan, which is much nearer to Shavuos. And the reason, this is explained in a similar Mishnah in Bechores, Perek Tes, where the Bartanura explains, so that the time period between the first Zman for Maisa Behema and the second was slightly longer, by making it the first of Sivan. It means more animals would have been included in that period. More animals would have been therefore available that could be bought and sold for the Yomim Tovim. So Be'echod B'Sivan is the second date. And the last date was Be'esrim V'Tisha Ba'av, the 29th of Av, which is well before 15 days prior to Sukkot. And Bartanur explains in Bechores, the reason for this date so much before Sukkot is because there's a machlokas, which we find the very first Mishnah of Rosh Hashanah. When exactly is the overall cut-off point for the year for Maisa Behema? The Gemara in Bechores learns that from the Pasuk Shana B'Shana in Parshas Re'eh, you can only take your Maisa Behema from the animals that are born in that 1 year. The next year starts a new period. When is that Rosh Hashanah? There's a machlokas. Some hold machlokas Tanoim. Some hold it's the first of Elul. Some hold it's the first of Tishri. Ben Azai was of the opinion, not quite sure, is it the first of Elul or the first of Tishri? So the easiest thing to do is to ensure there be no problem. Make your date the 29th of Av as your final date, and therefore you've captured all those animals in the year, and you won't therefore be going into the next month, which is The question is whether it's of the previous year or the coming year. So that's the view of Ben Azai. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon Oimrim be'echod benissen explains the Bartanura that Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon hold that one starts discussing Pesach not Shloshim Yom before the Chag, but 2 weeks before the Chag, 14 days. And therefore, it's at that point that the Zman for Maisa Behema comes in, where people from then on would not be permitted to eat their animals until they'd taken the Maisa Behema. And therefore, this date, if it's 14 days before, would be the 1st of Nisan. It's also the 1st of Sivan, rather than being 2 weeks before, or 14 days before Shavuos. Again, that's the same as Ben Azai, which is to try and make the time period between the first cut-off point, which was the 1st of Nisan, and the second, the 1st of Sivan, that extra time, rather than shortening it, would help the amount of korbanos, the amount of animals that will be available for the Oli Regalim. And the final date is Esrim V'Tisha Be'elul, the 29th of Elul. Now we just explained that according to Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, it should really be 14 days prior to the Yom Tov, 14 days prior to Sukkot, actually takes us to the 1st of Tishrei. Says the Mishnah, Mipnei ma omru be'esrim v'tisha. Why did Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon say the 29th of Elul? V'lo omru be'echo b'tishri. Why didn't they say the 1st of Tishrei? Answers the Gemara, the 1st of Tishrei is of course Rosh Hashanah. Mipnei shu Yom Tov. V'i efshar la'aseh b'Yom Tov. You can't take your Maisa Behema on Yom Tov. Why not? Because as we mentioned, the process is the animals would be passing by and the 10th one would be coloured with this tseva, the red tseva, and that of course you couldn't do on Yom Tov. Lefichoch, therefore, hiktimuhu le'esrim v'tisha be'elul. They brought this one day forward to the 29th of Elul.